Oh, you're here. Good. I've got another betrayal story for you. Sit down. Christmas Eve. Candlelight glowed across the ornaments, but the warmth was gone. She looked straight at me and said, I never loved you. For a second, the words hung in the air heavier than the scent of roasted ham on the table. The tree twinkled like it was mocking me, and the only sound in the room was a faint hum of holiday music drifting from the living room stereo. My name's Michael Carter. I'm 38 years old. I run a carpentry shop in town, and for most of my life, I thought I understood what family meant. My wife, Julia, was supposed to be the one person I could trust without question. My daughter, Lily, was in the next room, humming as she unwrapped a gift early because her mom said she could. That was my life, or at least the version of it I thought I had. I'd spent the whole day playing the part of a husband who still believed everything was fine. We'd taken Lily to a Christmas Eve service, and afterward I grilled steaks out back in the cold, pretending not to notice how Julia kept stepping away to check her phone. She said she was talking to her sister. I didn't call her out. I'd learned to stop asking questions I already knew the answers to. The dinner table looked like something out of a picture book. Candles flickering, dishes set, the smell of food filling the house. But Julia barely touched her plate. She kept her hands folded in front of her, eyes darting everywhere except mine. Lily had disappeared into the living room after inhaling her mashed potatoes, leaving just the two of us. I thought maybe she'd keep up the act through the holiday. Maybe she'd at least fake it for our daughter's sake. But then she finally lifted her eyes, and there it was, the moment I knew was coming. I never loved you. She said it without hesitation, like she'd been rehearsing. No cracks in her voice, no tears threatening to spill, just a statement, flat and merciless. The old me would have argued. I would have demanded to know how she could say that after 15 years of marriage, after raising a child together, after every late night I stayed at the shop just to keep a roof over our heads. I would have begged her to explain, to reconsider, to take it back. But not this time. I didn't say a word. I sat back, my fork resting on the edge of my plate, and stared at her until she started shifting in her chair. Silence could be louder than shouting, and in that moment, it was deafening. She wanted me to react, wanted me to collapse so she could stand over me, but I gave her nothing. She tried to keep her face steady, but I caught it. The smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth, the way her hands clenched a little tighter. My lack of response rattled her more than any explosion of anger ever could. She leaned forward slightly, her voice colder than the December wind outside. I should have left years ago. The only reason I stayed was Lily. Still, I stayed quiet. My eyes flicked toward the living room, where Lily's laughter rose above the sound of wrapping paper tearing. She had no idea what was unraveling just a few feet away. I let Julia's words hang, let her fill the silence with her justifications. She talked about being unhappy, about how she deserved more, about how she'd been done pretending for a long time. Every word slid off me like water, not because they didn't hurt, but because I'd been bracing myself for this exact storm. When she finally stopped, when the house seemed to settle into the tension, I leaned back and let a slow breath slip through my teeth. You're done pretending, I said quietly. Good. Her brow furrowed. She wasn't expecting that. I met her eyes and, for the first time all night, I let her see something other than silence. Not anger, not desperation, just certainty. And then, in my head, I thought the words I'd been carrying for weeks. I knew this was coming. I'd been waiting for it. I wasn't surprised. Not really. Because the truth is, I'd already seen the cracks forming long before she said it out loud. The late nights, the cold shoulder, the missing money, the way her laughter always came a little too easily when she was texting someone who wasn't me. So I didn't beg her to stay. I didn't plead for her love. Instead, I let the silence speak for me, and I let the words she thought would break me bounce around the room until they lost their power. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. Julia flinched at the sound. I stood, glanced toward the living room where Lily was still too distracted to notice, and then looked back at the woman who had just gutted me with a single sentence. I'm not surprised, I told her, my voice low but steady. And if you think this is the first time I've heard those words, You're wrong. Her eyes widened slightly, but before she could ask what I meant, I turned away, because what she couldn't know, was that I'd been preparing for this moment. I'd been collecting pieces of the truth she thought she'd hidden. And now, as Christmas Eve burned itself into memory, it was time to tell the story. So let me take you back to where the cracks first began to show. Weeks earlier, before Christmas lights even went up, I started noticing things I couldn't ignore. Julia had always been attached to her phone, texting her sister, checking work emails, scrolling through social media when she was bored. But something shifted. Suddenly, the phone wasn't just in her hand. It was glued to her like a lifeline. If I walked into the room, she'd flip it face down on the couch cushion. If it buzzed, she'd slip into the kitchen to check it. When I asked who it was, she'd roll her eyes and say, "No one, just a friend from work." Her words were casual, but her eyes wouldn't stay on mine. That's when the first real unease set in. At night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear the faint tapping of her thumbs. A soft glow under the blanket. It wasn't the light that kept me awake. It was the realization that she felt the need to hide. Then came the errands. At first, they were believable. A late run to the grocery store, picking up wrapping paper, and getting a head start on holiday shopping. But the times didn't add up. She'd leave at 8 and come home past 11 with nothing in her hands. Once, she walked in smelling faintly of wine. When I asked, she claimed she ran to a friend and grabbed a drink. I wanted to believe her, but the story didn't sit right. Which friend? Why not mentioned before? And why were her cheeks flushed, not with alcohol, but with the kind of energy that comes from being somewhere you shouldn't be? I tried brushing it off, convincing myself I was imagining things. But small lies have a way of unraveling when you tug at the threads. One night, she said she was going to her sister's house to help with a sewing project. I happened to bump into her sister the next day at the hardware store. Just casual small talk, and when I mentioned Julia's late-night visit, her sister frowned. "What visit?" she asked. She hadn't seen Julia in weeks. That was when my stomach dropped. After that, I paid closer attention. The slip-ups came faster. She'd say she was stuck in traffic, but the map app on my phone showed green roads the whole way. She'd say she worked late, but her job closed at 5. And when I asked simple questions, the kind a spouse should answer without hesitation, she grew defensive. "Why are you interrogating me?" She snapped once, shoving her phone into her purse, so hard I thought the screen would crack. The distance between us grew like a shadow. Dinners that used to be filled with chatter became silent affairs where she scrolled her phone, and I chewed in resentment. Weekends, once reserved for family traditions, turned into excuses. Every year we decorated the house together, blasting carols while Lily handed me ornaments. This time, Julia suddenly had work to catch up on. I decorated most of the house alone while she disappeared upstairs. When she finally emerged, she barely glanced at the tree. It wasn't just what she did, it was what she didn't do. No more kisses on the cheek when I left for work. No more asking how my day went. No more laughing at Lily's silly jokes during dinner. She was in the house, but she wasn't really there. And Lily noticed. Kids always do. One night, my daughter crawled onto the couch next to me while Julia sat upstairs. "Is Mom mad at you?" she whispered. I forced a smile and said no, but the lump in my throat made it hard to swallow. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Whatever Julia was hiding, it was already bleeding into the family we'd built. The financial cracks showed up not long after. I was balancing the books of the shop when I noticed a withdrawal I didn't recognize. A couple $100 here, then again a week later. At first, I thought it was an error, but then more popped up. Gas stations are on the other side of town. Restaurants we'd never been to together. Once, a hotel charge, not expensive enough for a family trip, but too pricey for just a lunch. When I brought it up, Julia brushed it off like lint on a sweater. "Oh, that was for gifts. Don't worry about it." She kissed me on the cheek, the first time in weeks, and walked away before I could press further. That fake kiss told me more than the receipts ever could. I wanted to confront her, to demand she look me in the eye and tell me the truth. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the thought of Lily overhearing. Or maybe it was because deep down, I already knew what I'd hear, and I wasn't ready for it. Weeks before she told me she never loved me, I already knew something was breaking. I just didn't know how far it went, or who else was helping her crack it wide open. One night, suspicion got the better of me, and I followed a glance she thought I didn't notice. Julia had been walking through the hallway, late after she thought Lily was asleep. She grabbed her phone from the counter and gave the garage door that same quick flick of her eyes. She didn't say anything, just padded upstairs like nothing was wrong. But that glance stuck to me like a thorn. I waited until the house went still, then pulled on my jacket and slipped into the cold. The garage smelled of motor oil and sawdust, the usual scent of my shop tools, but something was out of place. Against the far wall, half hidden behind a stack of plastic tubs filled with Christmas decorations, sat a suitcase. Black, medium size, with a tag I didn't recognize. My pulse hammered. I pulled it out, my fingers clumsy on the zipper. Inside, the truth was waiting for me like a knife. On top lay neatly folded clothes, not the kind of quick grab you'd expect for an overnight trip, but carefully chosen outfits, rolled tight like she'd been planning this. Beneath them, I found a thick envelope stuffed with cash. Not a fortune, but more than we ever kept lying around. Then I saw the papers. Legal documents, half complete. A draft divorce petition with her name scrawled on the top line. Custody clauses unfinished. But the intent is clear enough. She was preparing to leave. Not after the holidays, not months from now, but soon. And she'd been building her escape, like a soldier laying out weapons before a battle. I should have stopped there. That would have been enough to break most men. But my hands kept digging, like they needed to confirm the nightmare was real. That's when I found the receipts. Hotel stays. Mid-range places, not too flashy, not too cheap. Restaurants with bills for two, tagged under business dinners. The name printed at the bottom of one credit slip froze me solid. Daniel Cooper, my lawyer, my so-called friend, the man who'd handle my shops and corporation paperwork, who drafted my will, who reassured me when I worried about Lily's college savings being airtight. He was supposed to be my shield, my advisor, the one person who knew every corner of my financial life. And there he was, buying dinner for my wife, booking hotel rooms with her, financing their little errands with the money they'd skimmed from accounts I worked myself raw to fill. The air in that garage thinned to nothing. I sat on the cold cement floor with the suitcase open in front of me, staring at the proof that my wife wasn't just betraying me. She was conspiring against me with the one man I trusted most outside my family. Rage clawed at my chest, demanding release. I wanted to storm upstairs, drag Julia into the garage, and shove the evidence in her face. I wanted to call Daniel, scream into the phone, and tell him I knew everything. But then I thought of Lily, asleep in her room, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit her life. And I thought of the look Julia would give me if I confronted her without a plan, that smug, icy superiority she wore when she thought she had the upper hand. If I lost control now, I'd lose everything. She and Daniel would spin it, twist it, make me look unstable. So I closed the suitcase slowly, every muscle trembling from holding back. I shoved it back where I found it, tucked behind the tubs of ornaments like nothing had been touched. Then I walked back into the house, into the silence, into the role of the clueless husband. But I wasn't clueless anymore. That night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to her steady breathing, wondering how many times she'd come home from Daniel's arms and climbed into mine without a flicker of guilt. I stared at the ceiling until morning, memorizing every sound of the house, every creak of the wood, reminding myself of what I was fighting for. Because this wasn't just infidelity. This was war. They weren't just sneaking around behind my back. They were planning to strip me bare. Julia had the betrayal. Daniel had access. Together, they thought they'd built a perfect trap. But they underestimated me. For now, I let her sleep. For now, I let him believe I was still in the dark. But in that moment, in the quiet aftermath of discovery, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explode. I would prepare. And when the time came, the begging wouldn't come from me. While she carried on like nothing was wrong, I made my first real move. At breakfast the next morning, Julia sipped her coffee with that blank expression she'd perfected, the kind that said I'm here, but I'm already somewhere else. Lily was talking about a school project, and Julia nodded without listening, her eyes drifting toward her phone whenever it buzzed. I smiled, buttered my toast, and asked if anyone wanted orange juice. I couldn't go to Daniel. Obviously, he was part of the rot. But I knew someone who could point me in a safer direction. Mark, one of my suppliers. He'd gone through a divorce a year before, a brutal one, but he'd walked away with custody of his kids. When I asked him over the phone if he trusted his attorney, he didn't hesitate. Paul Harris, he said. Discreet, smart, doesn't scare easily. I'll text you his number. I waited until Julia left for another one of her errands that night. As soon as the garage door closed behind her, I called Paul. His voice was steady, professional, but with an edge that told me he'd heard stories like mine before. We agreed to meet the next morning in his office before business hours. Walking into that office felt like crossing a threshold I could never come back from. Paul was mid-40s, sharp suit, sharp eyes, no wasted words. I laid out what I had, photos of the receipts, copies of bank statements, the details about the suitcase. I didn't sugarcoat it. Julia and Daniel were working together, and I needed to protect myself and Lily before they gutted me. Paul leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. You're right to come now. This isn't just infidelity. This is collusion. Hearing it put into words lit fire in my chest. Collusion. Not just betrayal of a marriage, but betrayal of trust, of the law, of the bond between client and attorney. Paul went through each piece methodically. These hotel receipts, combined with the draft of the divorce petition, that's a conflict of interest for Daniel. The size of a skyscraper. If we push this through the bar association, he's finished. I nodded, but my jaw was tight. That's not enough. I don't just want him disbarred. I want Lily to be safe. Julia doesn't get to destroy everything and then take my daughter with her. Paul gave a small smile. Then we focus on custody leverage. If we can prove financial misconduct and Daniel's involvement, we paint a picture of instability. Judges don't like instability around children. For the first time in weeks, I felt the scales tip, even if just a little. The first step was locking down what Julia couldn't reach. Paul guided me through transferring assets into a protected account under the business, restructuring the inheritance account so she couldn't touch it, and freezing the joint card she'd been bleeding dry. It took hours of paperwork, signatures, intense breaths, but by the time we were done, the accounts were safer than they'd ever been. Next came the groundwork for custody. Paul told me to start documenting everything. Her absences, her erratic behavior, the lies she told Lily. Don't confront her, he warned. The calmer you look, the more reckless she'll become. And every reckless choice she makes is another brick in your wall of evidence. So that's exactly what I did. At home, I played my part. I asked about her day, kissed her cheek when she came through the door, and nodded when she lied about traffic or errands. I didn't roll my eyes when she spent an hour locked in the bathroom with her phone. I didn't flinch when she ignored Lily's questions. I just kept my smile steady, even as inside me, the resolve hardened into steel. I became an actor in my own house. She thought she was the only one with secrets, the only one running a game, but every day she left, every night she came back smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I marked it down in a small notebook hidden in the shop. Dates, times, inconsistencies, evidence. Lily would crawl onto my lap, sometimes, frowning. Dad, why is Mom always so busy now? I'd hug her tight, force my voice to stay gentle. She's just distracted, honey. Don't worry. I've got you. And I meant it. More than anything, I meant it. Weeks passed like that, a performance we both knew wasn't sustainable. But while Julia thought she was building her exit strategy, I was quietly dismantling it brick by brick. By the end of December, Paul had enough to file motions, custody leverage, financial protections, and the beginnings of complaint to the bar about Daniel's misconduct. It wasn't the end yet, but it was the first time I felt like I wasn't drowning. Back at the dinner table one night, Julia smiled faintly at her phone and whispered something under her breath. I took a bite of my steak, chewed slowly, and smiled to myself. She thought she was winning, but the truth was she'd already lost. By the time the holidays closed in, her perfect plan was about to collapse. It was 3 days after Christmas, a gray morning when the streets were still littered with discarded wrapping paper and half-dead Christmas trees waiting to be dragged to the curb. Julia thought she was going to slip into the new year with everything in her hands. Instead, she woke up to find her world slipping through her fingers. It started in the kitchen. She was at the counter, laptop open, phone pressed her ear. I was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, pretending to scroll through the news. Her voice rose, sharp and frantic, as she typed her way into the bank portal. I didn't need to look to know what she was seeing. Frozen accounts, transactions denied, her carefully hoarded lifeline gone. "Why isn't this working?" she hissed, slamming the laptop lid. She grabbed her phone with both hands like it might bite her, dialing so fast she almost dropped it. I sipped my coffee, quiet, listening as she barked into the receiver. "Daniel, pick up, pick up. What the hell is going on?" She paced the kitchen, phone pressed so hard against her ear I thought she'd snap it in half. Finally, a voice on the other end must have answered, because her tone dropped, trembling. "What do you mean, suspended?" I leaned back in my chair, let the bitter coffee warm my throat. She turned her back to me, but I could still hear her. No, this isn't. How could they? "Daniel, you promised." She went silent, and then louder, desperate. "So that's it? You're just leaving me like this?" Her shoulders sagged. She whispered something I couldn't catch, then slowly lowered the phone. When she turned around, her face was a mask of fury. "This is your doing." I raised my eyebrows, keeping my voice level. "My doing?" She stormed across the room, eyes blazing, fists clenched. "Don't play dumb with me, Michael. You think I don't know? You think I can't see what you've done? You froze the accounts. You went behind my back." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp not to cut. "Behind your back? That's rich, Julia." Her face twisted, all pretense stripped away. "You betrayed me," she spat. "You destroyed everything I built." There it was, the word, betrayal, from her lips, aimed at me, the woman who'd spent months sneaking around with my lawyer, draining my accounts, drafting petitions in secret, now had the audacity to accuse me. "Funny," I said softly. "I thought betrayal was sneaking out at night and lying about where you've been. Or maybe it's conspiring with the man who was supposed to protect our family." Her jaw tightened. She looked like she wanted to claw the words out of my mouth. But before she could answer, a small voice cut through the tension. "Dad." Lily stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide. She'd been listening long enough to understand this wasn't just another argument. Her mother's face went pale. I forced my voice calm, softer. "Go back to your room, sweetheart." But she didn't move. "Why is Mom yelling? Why is she saying you betrayed her?" Julia stepped forward, panic flashing across her face. "Lily, honey, this isn't..." I held up a hand, stopping her. My eyes stayed on my daughter's. "Because sometimes people lie to protect themselves," I said carefully, "but you need to know something. I will never lie to you about where my loyalty is. It's with you, always." Her lip trembled, and for a second I thought she might cry. But she nodded slowly, hugged the rabbit tighter, and slipped back into her room. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Julia looked at me like I'd stolen her last card. Maybe I had. She broke first. The rage drained from her eyes, replaced by something rawer, fear. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Michael, I didn't mean for it to go this far." I set my coffee cup down, steady. "You meant for it to go far enough." Her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, hands shaking, eyes glistening with tears that finally broke through the cold mask she'd worn for months. For the first time in what felt like forever, Julia wasn't the one in control. She wasn't icy, untouchable, or smug. She was desperate. "Please," she whispered, crawling closer, clutching at the hem of my jeans like a drowning woman grabbing for a rope. "Please, don't leave me. I'll fix it. I'll end it with Daniel. I'll make it right. Just Don't take Lily from me. Her voice cracked again, broken sobs spilling into the kitchen. She clung to me, the same woman who sat across from me on Christmas Eve and told me she never loved me, now begging for another chance. I looked down at her, not with pity, not with rage, but with something colder. Certainty. You had your chance, Julia. You had every chance. She shook her head violently, tears dripping onto the tile. No, you don't understand. I was confused. I didn't mean it. Michael, please. Her sobs echoed through the house, and for a moment I almost felt the weight of 15 years pressing against me, reminding me of the woman she used to be, the life we once shared. But then I remembered the suitcase, the lies, the way she told me, flat and merciless. I never loved you. And just like that, the weight lifted. I stepped back, forcing her hands to slip from my jeans. She collapsed against the floor, a sobbing heap, begging through tears that blurred her mascara. It wasn't me on my knees. It was her. The holidays passed, and by early January, the truth came out in court. Snow still clung to the sidewalks when I walked into the courthouse, Lily's small hand tucked in mine. Paul was already waiting inside, crisp suit, files neatly stacked. Julia stood across the room, pale and nervous, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. For the first time in months, she didn't have Daniel at her side. He was too busy scrambling to save what was left of his career, suspended pending investigation. Judge Ramirez entered, his voice steady, commanding order. The hearing wasn't long, but it was brutal. Paul laid out the evidence piece by piece. Julia's financial misconduct, the hidden suitcase, the receipts linking her to Daniel, the conflict of interest that poisoned everything Daniel had touched. Every word tightened the noose around her credibility. Julia tried to fight back. She claimed I was controlling, that I cut her off from accounts unfairly. But her voice cracked, her hands shook, and every accusation fell flat when Paul countered with proof. Documents, dates, numbers that couldn't be twisted. When the judge finally spoke, it was with the calm finality of a gavel already struck. Primary custody of Lily Carter is granted to her father, Michael Carter. Mrs. Carter will be permitted supervised visitation pending further review. The words hit Julia like a body blow. She slumped in her chair, her lawyer whispering useless comfort in her ear. Across the room, I felt Lily squeeze my hand tighter. I glanced down at her, and she looked up at me with eyes that said everything. Relief, trust, safety. We walked out of that courtroom together. But Julia wasn't done yet. That night, she showed up at the house. I heard the knock after Lily had gone to bed, soft at first, then frantic. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She stood there, coat half buttoned, hair a mess, eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she looked like the woman I married, fragile, desperate, human. Michael, she whispered, her voice raw. It was a mistake. All of it. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I swear I can fix this. Please, don't shut me out forever. She reached for me, but I didn't move. I stared at her, remembering Christmas Eve, the cold certainty in her voice as she told me she never loved me. Remembering her hand on my lawyer's arm, her lips on someone else's glass of wine. Her lies layered so thick they smothered everything we once had. Slowly I shook my head. You said it yourself, Julia. Her eyes widened, tears threatening again. You never loved me. The words hit her harder than the judge's ruling. She staggered back like I'd slapped her. For once, there was nothing left for her to say. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a long moment, listening to her sobs fade into the night. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't triumph. It was released. A chain snapping free. The next morning, I brewed coffee while Lily sat at the table, sketching in her notebook. She looked up and smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in weeks. The house felt lighter, the air easier to breathe. When we stepped outside, the winter sun was breaking through gray clouds, melting the last of the ice on the driveway. I held Lily's hand, and together we walked into a new year. Just the two of us, stronger than the storm we'd survived. Behind us, the house was quiet. Julia's shadow no longer filled it. She was alone now, with nothing but her choices. The choice had been made long before January. She just didn't realize it until it was too late. If your wife told you on Christmas Eve that she never loved you, would you have seen it coming? Or would it have blindsided you? And when she begged after everything, would you have given her another chance or shut the door? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more betrayal stories like this, hit subscribe.